Welcome to Exploring the Latin Breakdown. Part 2, Hip Hop's Latin Heartbeat. Sponsored by Urban Exegesis Studios and presented by Dr. Derrick Colon.
Apache is a famous instrumental track that has become iconic in hip-hop and breaking culture. The song has a fascinating history, starting in the 1960s, evolving through various versions and finding a lasting place in music history. Here's a breakdown of its key points. Number 1, the original, The Shadows in 1960. The first version of Apache was written by Jerry Lorden and recorded by The Shadows, a British instrumental rock group in 1960. Their recording featured a surf rock style guitar sound and reached number 1 on the UK singles chart. The song was named after the 1954 film Apache and had a distinctly Western vibe, evoking imagery of Native American culture. Number 2, the breakbeat classic, The Incredible Bongo Band, 1973. The most famous version of Apache was recorded by the Incredible Bongo Band in 1973. This version, produced by Michael Viner, is renowned for its heavy use of percussion, especially the bongos and the congas. The band was initially formed to create soundtrack music, but their recording of Apache became legendary in its own right. The Incredible Bongo Band's version didn't achieve mainstream success at the time of its release, but it became one of the most important records in hip-hop history. The song features a drum break that would go on to be heavily sampled and played during breaking sessions in the 1970s and the 1980s. Number 3, hip-hop and breaking influence. Apache became a breaking anthem due to its infectious rhythm and powerful drum break, particularly within the emerging hip-hop culture in the Bronx during the 1970s. DJs like Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and Africa Bambaataa would extend the song's instrumental breaks to keep breakers or b-boys and b-girls moving. Bambaataa famously dubbed the song the national anthem of hip-hop. The conga player on the Incredible Bongo Band's version of Apache was King Erison, a Bahamian percussionist known for his exceptional skill and dynamic performances. Here's a brief history of King Erison and his contribution to Apache. Born in Nassau, Bahamas in 1941, King Erison moved to the United States to pursue his music career. He became one of the most sought-after session musicians in Hollywood, known for his ability to play congas, bongo, and various percussion instruments. His early influences came from the Afro-Caribbean music traditions of his native Bahamas, which helped shape his distinct style. The Incredible Bongo Band's Apache is hip-hop's greatest record to date.
Let's dive into some fascinating and foundational elements of hip-hop culture. The connection between Afro-Caribbean rhythms and funk, plus hip-hop, is deep and rich. The sounds, such as boogaloo, habanera, rumba, guaguancó, palo, and the New York Mozambique, are all part of the diverse tapestry of influences that help shape hip-hop's sonic identity. tracks that carry those rhythms or integrate them in some way laid the groundwork for hip-hop's development. It's also essential to acknowledge how those rhythms intersected with soul and funk, especially the drum breaks. These songs exemplify the blend of Afro-Caribbean and African-American rhythmic traditions, which were at the heart of hip-hop's evolution.
This is ghetto brother power, baby. From the Bronx. Ghetto brothers. Listen to that bass, man. Let's go. The baddest bass player here in the country. What about David? Burning man, bro.
Moving from these breaks that contain the rhythms of funk and boogaloo, habanera, rumba, guaguancó, palo, and the New York Mozambique, it is important to understand that there were many iterations of these rhythms that were used in these records. The next wave came in the form of rap records, which you can hear in part 1 of Exploring the Latin Breakdown. These records were laced with these same Latin rhythms. We now move on to the next wave of sounds that made its way into the hip-hop ecosystem in the form of electro-funk. One can clearly hear the Latin percussive elements as the music moved from breakbeats to live bands to drum machines, from Apache and the rest of the traditional b-boy anthems to rap music and into the electro-funk sound. The Latin pulse has been ever present in the sonic tapestry of hip-hop culture. You know, as hip-hop enters into the 1980s, the sound of the streets began to shift. While, you know, the funk and the soul sounds of the 70s, they still remained influential, but there were new technologies and new instruments, most notably, right, synthesizers and drum machines. They brought in this new era of electro-funk. And this was a genre marked by futuristic, robotic beats, and they were built around this drum machine called the TR-808 drum machine, right? And it gave a whole new aesthetic to hip-hop and to breaking. The fusion of electro-funk and Latin rhythms were not surprising to the people of New York. This is a melting pot, right? So we see the percussions were blended in the 70s breakbeats, but the electro-funk often used the same syncopation and the polyrhythms inspired by the Latin styles. So while, you know, the sound of hip-hop and breaking music evolved from the 70s to the 80s, the one thing that remained constant, this is important, was the importance of rhythm. The original b-boy anthems with their heavy Latin influences were foundation upon which the electro-funk sound was built. The beats may have become, you know, more futuristic, but the essence of the music, its ability to make people move, was the same. as breaking grew in popularity, it spread beyond the Bronx to the rest of the world. The music also expands, right? You got tracks now like Planet Rock, and later electro-funk hits became international hits, introducing a global audience to the rhythms of the Bronx. Yet, for the B-boys in New York, the connection between these new sounds and the classics like Apache, it was clear. Whether they were spinning on their heads to a bongo-driven breakbeat or a robotic sound from the 808, the Latin pulse was always there, keeping the dancers in sync with the music. So the evolution from the Latin-infused b-boy anthems of the 70s to the electro-funk sound of the 80s represents a broader story of how hip-hop grew and it changed while still maintaining its roots, the funk and the Latin go-offs. The music's rhythmic complexities and cross-cultural influences are what gave it what we call staying power, right? Whether it was the funk breaks of Apache or the robotic sounds of Planet Rock. And this proves something, that no matter how futuristic the sound became, it was always grounded in the traditions of the Bronx streets.